Okay, are you ready to do some finance math? Today we're going to do 5 common finance math problems. Here goes number 1. A lender agrees to make a loan based on an 80% LTV. If the property appraises for $275,500 and has a sales price of $273,800, what is the loan amount? So what I'm going to do is first just take a look at the numbers that this problem is giving me. I know there's an 80% LTV. I know the property appraised for $275,500 and it has a sales price of $273,800, and what we're looking for here is the loan amount. Luckily, I know that there is a formula I could memorize for this. If I take the value of a property, multiply by the LTV, or the loan to value ratio, that's going to give me a loan amount. And remember, a loan amount is what we are looking for. So let's see if we can figure out this equation. Well, the value, this is where you might get tripped up. The problem says it appraises for $275,500, but the sales price is only $273,800. In a case like this, we are going to use the lower value. Even though it appraised for more money, they only wanted to buy the house for $273,800. So as far as the bank is concerned, that is the value. They're not going to go off of the higher number and give you more money than you originally thought you were going to get. So our value is $273,800. We're going to multiply that by the LTV ratio. LTV stands for loan to value. We are comparing the amount of the loan to the value of the property. And in the problem, it says 80%. So I can just put that there, and that should give us our loan amount. Now, I'm just going to do some simple math and multiply. And if I've used my calculator correctly, which is sometimes iffy, we find that we have an answer of $219,040. I'm hoping so. In fact, I'm going to assume that is so. That is our answer. If I didn't get it right, somebody let me know. Otherwise, our answer is $219,040. Final answer. All right, that wasn't so bad. Let's move on to problem number 2. Felicia is making payments on a 6.75% fixed rate 30-year mortgage loan. The original amount of the loan was $278,000. If the loan was made based on a factor of 6.485, how much is Felicia's monthly loan payment? All right, where are we going to start with identifying these numbers? We got a 6.75% fixed rate 30-year mortgage. So I know an interest rate. I know it's for 30 years. The original loan was for $278,000. And then I've got this factor of 6.485. Now first, let's talk about what a factor is. I like to teach a factor as a rate of monthly P&I payments. That's monthly payments. So for every $1,000 that you borrow, you're going to pay, in this case, $6.485. So if you borrow $1,000, you would be paying $6.48 for 30 years every month until it was paid back. If you borrow $2,000, you'd be paying $12, almost $13 every month until it got paid back. So if you borrow $3,000, you'd be paying 6.485 3 times, and that would give you your monthly payment amount. So what we're really doing is we're going backwards on this. If we understand what a factor is, I know that we have got an equation. Usually what we do, or I shouldn't say equation, I should say a formula. So our formula for this is if we take the number of 1,000s that are borrowed and we multiply it by our factor, we'll get a monthly P&I payment amount. That is the formula we need to know. And if we understand what a factor is, this isn't so bad. So the number of thousands borrowed, I guess to know that, we need to know the loan amount. So the problem says the loan was for $278,000. So what I'm going to do is take 278,000 divided by 1,000, and that's going to give me 278. There are 278 thousands in 278,000. Well, we have to multiply that by our factor, and we know our factor is actually 6.485, which is usually a dollar amount. No, not even usually, always, which is always a dollar amount. And when we multiply that, we're going to get a monthly loan payment of, and let's use this calculator, it's giving me $1,802.83. Final answer. So you can see, when you know the formula, this isn't so bad. The other thing that makes it not so bad is, do you understand the numbers that are in the problem? If you know what the numbers are, they're not as scary because there's so many of them. So hopefully this is helping. Let's move on to finance problem number 3. Scott purchased a home for $510,390 at 4.5% for 30 years. The loan was for 80% of the sales price. Scott makes payments of $2,068.85 a month. What is the total amount of interest that Scott will have paid when his loan is paid in full? Okay, we're going to stop. We're going to look at all these numbers and not panic because there are a lot. So we know we have a sales price here of $510,390. And sometimes it might even help to say sales price, so we know what it is. We got a 4.5%, and we know this is going to be for an annual interest rate. And then we know 30 years is our term, or how long we had the loan for. We've got an 80% LTV. And we know there are monthly payments of $2,068.85. Again, that's a lot of numbers, but I'm going to look to see what are they asking me for. And we want to know the total interest paid over the entire span of this loan. Sometimes you'll see this asked as, what is the interest over the life of the loan? So when it says will have paid when his loan is paid in full, this could be worded as interest over the life of the loan. So don't get confused if that's how it's worded on your exam. Remember, they can word these questions lots of different ways, but the math stays the same. Okay, so we want to know how much is this total interest that he's paying over the life of the loan. Well, what we do know is that the payments that he's making monthly are $2,068.85 a month. And we also know that he's making these payments. He's paying this loan for 30 years. And if you're making payments for 30 years, you're doing that 12 times a year. So that means if I multiply this 30 years times 12, that gives me 360. Overall, what I know is that he's going to be making payments of $2,068 360 times. And that will give me the total principal and interest, everything he's paying over the 30 years. So over 30 years, he's going to write checks, $2,068.85, 360 times. And if I did my math right, that gives me $744,786. That is total principal and interest over 30 years. But that's not what the problem is asking me. It's asking me about, of that, how much is interest? This is principal and it's interest. So of that $744,786, if we look back at the problem, we remember he purchased the house for $510,390. That's what he purchased the house for. But don't get caught. If that is the sales price, remember, he did not borrow 100% of that $510,000. He borrowed 80% of that. So I'm just going to do a little math over here. If I take that $510,390 and I multiply it by 80%, that's going to tell me what our loan amount is. And that should look familiar because it's the same equation or formula that we used in prior problems. We're taking the value and multiplying it by the LTV, and we're getting a loan amount. So $510,390 times 80% gives me $408,312. That is our loan amount. When this person, Scott, bought the house, he only needed to get a loan for $408,312. That's what he's borrowed. So when I come back over here, over 30 years, he might have paid back the bank $744,786, but he only borrowed $408,312 to begin with, which means the difference would be what he paid in interest. And difference meaning we're going to subtract. So I'm going to take the $744,786 and I'm going to subtract $408,312 because this is our total P&I. This is our total principal we borrowed. And when we do this math, we'll have total interest left over. And with the magic of a calculator, I find out the total interest over 30 years. $336,474. That's our answer. Now, there were a lot of steps in that problem, but hopefully you understand what we did. We knew how much he paid every month, and we knew how many times he was going to make that payment. So that gave us a total of $744,786. Of that amount, we needed to figure out how much was going to be our principal. And what we did in step 4 was figure out what our actual loan amount or our principal amount was. And for step 5, we subtracted that from the total to give us our answer. I know it seems like a lot, but don't worry. Just go ahead, press rewind if you got lost, and watch me do it again. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. These problems don't change. All you need to do is memorize the steps and you'll get them right. All right, let's move on to our next problem. After speaking to a lender, Katrina has been quoted a maximum monthly PITI payment of $2,216.67. Their lender required a housing expense ratio of 28%. Based on these numbers, what is Katrina's annual income? Well, you know the deal. Let's point out these numbers. Well, we've got a PITI payment made monthly for $2,216.67 and a housing expense ratio of 28%. And it's asking us to find Katrina's annual income. Now, guys, it says annual income here. Don't miss that. So what do we know? Well, the first thing we want to think about is what does that 28% mean? What we're saying is no more than 28% of what somebody makes a month their monthly gross income, which I call it MGI. That's just how I do it, MGI. Your teacher might call it a GMI. It's all the same. It's how much somebody makes a month before taxes. When you have whatever you make a month, no more than 28% of that can go towards your monthly housing expenses. And it helps if I spell expenses right. EXPENSES. There we go. Now, what do we mean by housing expenses? That could be your PITI. Maybe you've got some PMI, just expenses that you pay towards housing, things you have to pay because you have a mortgage payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. If you had to get PMI, it would include that. So if we know what this problem is saying Katrina was told the max she could spend would be $2,216.67. So let's put this into a formula. If you take your monthly gross income and you multiply it by that 28%, you will get the maximum PITI, or housing expenses. See, housing expenses over here, HE. The maximum PITI, or housing expenses payment. So let's do it. Well, our monthly gross income, we don't know that. But we do know the 28%, and we do know that this monthly PITI amount, that is the $2,216.67. So we don't know what the monthly gross income is, but we do know the 28%, and we know what our final kind of answer is, the $2,216.67. So we do a little pre-algebra. We got to find out what this question mark is. And to do that, what we're going to do is say, oh, well, if we multiply it over here, we got to divide to get rid of it and divide to get rid of it. So our answer is going to be $2,216.67 divided by 28%. And when I do that in our magical calculator, what I'm going to get is $7,916.67. That is what somebody would have to make a month in order for them to have a payment that was $2,216.67. That's great. And please trust me when I say that will be an answer choice on the test. But it is not the answer. Because remember, guys, this problem is asking us about annual income. And what we found was monthly. Monthly, somebody would need to make $7,916. So to find annual, I'm just going to multiply by 12. And what that's going to give me is $95,000. Katrina had to have made, or has to be bringing in, $95,000 annually. That's a year, which means she would be bringing in $7,000, almost $8,000 a month. So it's $7,916 a month, and 28% of that would be her maximum housing expense payment. Does that make sense? I'm really hoping so. And then let's move to our next problem. Jasper purchased a home for $373,000 with a 6% fixed rate, fully amortized 30-year loan in the principal amount of $298,400. Their monthly payment will be $1,789.06 per month. How much of the first monthly payment will be applied towards the original loan balance? All right, guys, we can do this. Let's review what the numbers are in our problem. We got $373,000. That's the sales price. I'll say sales price up here. with a 6% fixed rate, fully amortized 30-year loan. So I know this is our interest rate, and I know this is our term, how many years we have it. And the principal amount of $298,400. So that's going to be my loan. And we know the monthly payments are $1,789.06 per month. And the problem is asking us how much of that monthly payment is going to be applied towards the loan balance. All right, there's a lot going on here. So let's stop and think about what we know. Jasper bought this house. Now, the sales price was $373,000. But the problem tells us that there's a loan of $298,400. So that's good because the problem is asking about a loan balance. And so we're dealing with a loan. So our original loan is for $298,400. Now we also know that there's going to be a payment. The problem tells us that our payment is going to be $1,789.06 every month. Now, what do we know? This problem says it is a fixed rate, fully amortized loan. So that means that $1,789.06, that does not change over the entire 30-year span of this loan. Every single month, this person, Jasper, owes $1,789.06. Here's the thing, though. That number is going to be made up of two things: principal and interest. Even though Jasper's going to write a check for $1,700, that does not all go to reducing how much he owes the bank. Only the principal amount goes to reducing the principal balance. Only his principal amount of the payment goes to reduce how much he owes the bank. The rest of it is interest. Now, we don't know anything about the principal, but we do know something about the interest. That interest rate was 6%, or I should say is 6%. And we know that 6% is based off of what this person borrowed, which was $298,400. If I take that $298,400 and I multiply it by 6%, that will tell me an amount of annual interest. Remember, guys, when you're quoted an interest rate in finance like this, it is normally an annual rate of interest. So if you borrowed $298,400 at 6% for 1 year, then what you would owe the bank after all that time just for a year would be $17,904 for a year. That's what you would owe to borrow that money for a year. But Jasper just bought the house and he's only had a loan for a month. So he doesn't want to pay the bank $17,000 for borrowing the money for 1 month. He wants to pay for 1/12 of a year. So I'm going to take the $17,904 divided by 12. And that means for 1 month, for the privilege of borrowing this money for 1 month, he owes the bank $1,492 in interest for 1 month. So that could really go up here. Even though he's writing a check for $1,789.06, $1,492 of it is going towards interest, which means the difference is our principal. So let's do that math over here. He's writing a check for $1,789.06, but this is principal and interest. We know his interest for that month that he owes is $14.92. So the difference will be what goes towards principal, which is going to be $297.06. Of that entire payment, $297.06 is principal. So let's take that all the way back up here. What we know is he owed $298,400 before he made a single payment. Then he made a payment, and of that $1,700, $297.06 went towards principal. And that means his new balance. His new balance is going to be, and I wish I had a drum roll here, $298,102.94. That's his new balance. Now, guys, I want to take a moment to say, remember what this problem was asking us. How much of this first monthly payment will be applied towards the original loan balance? And that answer is what we found right here. That is that $297.06. That is our final answer. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and put a little heart around it. Final answer. However, I took it to the next step and I found our new balance. Why did I do that? Because this is a common problem on the test. On the test, often they don't just want you to know what the principal balance is that's being taken off of, or the principal amount that's being taken off the balance. A lot of times they will ask you, what is the new balance? And it just meant taking it a step further. So don't get it wrong on the test. If it's asking you for how much is being applied towards the original loan balance, stop here. But if they take it a step further and ask you what the new balance is going to be, that's when we do this subtraction. I know it was a little overkill, but I'm really hoping it'll help you when you go to take this test. And guys, can you believe it? That's 5 problems right there. And you know what? You don't have to get all the math right, but if you could at least get half or a little bit more than half of the math right, it gets you so much closer to passing. That's all I have for you today. I hope it helps. And you know what? Join me later this week and I'll do 5 more finance problems to help you pass the math section of your real estate exam. Bye.